In the dense, suffocating silence of the Pacific Northwest wilderness, where the Douglas firs grow so thick they swallow the sun, there exists a biological shadow that has eluded the modern world for over 2 centuries. We are told by the halls of academia that the age of discovery is over, that every square inch of our planet has been mapped, cataloged, and stripped of its mystery. Yet, every year, thousands of credible witnesses, engineers, forensic experts, and seasoned woodsmen emerge from the tree line with eyes wide and voices trembling, describing a creature that defies the known laws of primate evolution. The legend of the Sasquatch is often dismissed as campfire folklore, but when we move past the grainy footage and the anecdotal evidence, we find ourselves standing at the edge of a scientific conspiracy that involves suppressed laboratory results and a genetic puzzle that some of the most powerful institutions in the world would rather see buried forever. The story does not begin with a blurry video from 1967, but rather in the very fabric of our own genetic code. In the late 20th century and moving into the 21st, several independent research teams began collecting hair, blood, and tissue samples from locations that mainstream science refused to touch. One of the most haunting cases occurred in the mountains of British Columbia, where a local tracker discovered a series of massive, non-human footprints leading toward a cluster of coarse, reddish-brown hair caught on a jagged rock. When these fibers were sent to a high-security lab for analysis, the technicians expected to find the markers of a grizzly bear or perhaps a misplaced mountain goat. Instead, the sequencing returned a result that was so impossible, it was immediately flagged as a laboratory error. The mitochondrial DNA, the lineage passed down through the mother, was unmistakably human. However, the nuclear DNA, which provides the blueprint for the entire organism, was a chaotic mosaic of unknown primate markers that shared no match with anything currently indexed in the worldwide genetic databases. This is where the narrative shifts from a monster hunt to a cover-up. If these creatures are merely undiscovered apes, their DNA should show a clear evolutionary path branching off from the great apes of Africa or the orangutans of Asia. But the results suggested something far more disturbing: a hybrid species that appeared to have been intentionally engineered or evolved through a process that bypasses the slow crawl of Darwinian natural selection. When the lead researchers attempted to publish these findings in 1999, they were met with a wall of institutional silence. Peer-reviewed journals refused to even look at the data, citing the lack of a physical specimen, while government agencies reportedly moved in to seize the original samples under the guise of biohazard protocols. We must ask ourselves why the discovery of a new hominid would be treated as a threat rather than a triumph of biology. To acknowledge the existence of a creature that is 80% human in its genetic makeup would be to upend the entire legal and social structure of the modern world. If the Sasquatch possesses human-grade mitochondrial DNA, does it have human rights? Would the vast, multi-billion-dollar timber and mining industries be forced to halt operations to protect the habitat of a near-human cousin? The economic implications of a living, breathing, missing link are so catastrophic that it becomes far more efficient to label the entire phenomenon a mass hallucination. Consider the strange events of 2012. When a project involving over 100 hair and tissue samples was supposedly completed. The researchers claimed to have found evidence of a lineage that separated from the human branch only 15,000 years ago, a mere heartbeat in evolutionary time. They described a creature that was not a primitive beast, but a sister species. Yet, within weeks of the data being leaked, the project was thoroughly discredited by a coordinated media campaign, and the labs involved found their funding stripped almost overnight. Scientists who had spent decades in the field were suddenly silenced, their reputations dismantled in the public eye. This pattern of suppression suggests that we are not just looking for a giant ape in the woods. We are looking for a secret that is written in our own blood. There are whispers in the dark corners of the anthropological community about the existence of the Denisovans and the Red Deer Cave people, ancient human relatives that were supposed to have died out tens of thousands of years ago. But what if they never left? What if they retreated into the deepest, most inaccessible reaches of the earth, evolving a level of sensory awareness that makes our modern technology look like primitive toys? These beings seem to possess an uncanny ability to sense electromagnetic frequencies, allowing them to avoid camera traps and thermal imaging with a precision that borders on the supernatural. As we move deeper into the mysteries of the wilderness, we find that the physical evidence is only the tip of the spear. The real story lies in the vaults of private laboratories and the classified archives of national parks, where the DNA of the unknown is kept under lock and key. We are living alongside a ghost species, a silent titan that watches us from the shadows of the forest, while the gatekeepers of science work tirelessly to ensure that the mirror they hold up to humanity remains cracked and distorted. The question is no longer whether they exist, but rather, what truth are they carrying in their cells that we are so afraid to face? The deeper we probe into the genetic anomalies of these elusive giants, the more we encounter a chilling consistency in the reports of those who have tried to bring the truth to light. It is not merely the absence of a body that keeps the mystery alive, but the systematic disappearance of evidence that has already been found. In 1978, a high-ranking official within the Forestry Service allegedly discovered a partial skeleton in a remote cavern near the Olympic Peninsula. The remains were described as being over 8 feet tall, with a skull that possessed a massive sagittal crest and teeth that showed a diet of both tough, fibrous plants and raw protein. Within 48 hours of the discovery, a specialized team of federal agents arrived on the scene, cordoned off a 5-mile radius, and transported the remains to an undisclosed facility in Maryland. No public record of this find exists today, and the original whistleblower was reassigned to a desk job 3,000 miles away before being forced into early retirement. This disappearance of physical remains points toward a much larger, global effort to manage the narrative of human origins. If we look toward the remote wilderness of Siberia, the legends of the Almas provide a mirror to the North American experience. In the mid-20th century, Soviet scientists took the phenomenon so seriously that they formed a secret commission to investigate the possibility of a relict hominid population surviving in the Altai Mountains. They recovered several samples of what appeared to be biological waste and hair that differed significantly from any known animal in the region. The analysis, conducted in 1958, revealed a cellular structure that functioned with a much higher metabolic rate than humans, allowing for survival in sub-zero temperatures without the need for complex clothing or shelter. Yet, just as the findings were about to be presented to the international community, the project was abruptly shut down by the state security apparatus, and the lead researcher's notebooks were classified as state secret. What is it about the DNA of these creatures that causes such a visceral reaction from the authorities? Some independent geneticists who have had fleeting access to leaked data suggest that the Sasquatch genome contains a series of artificial-looking sequences, segments of DNA, that do not appear to have been formed by the messy, random mutations of natural history. These sequences look more like highly optimized genetic edits designed to enhance physical strength, night vision, and even a primitive form of infrasonic communication. This leads us to a theory so radical it threatens to collapse our understanding of history, that these beings are not a failed branch of evolution, but perhaps a more resilient version of the human design, one that was meant to survive a cataclysm that our own ancestors were never supposed to endure. In 2016, a retired forensic scientist from the United Kingdom came forward with a story about a sample he had processed for a private client. The sample was a piece of skin with thick, leathery hair attached, recovered from a landslide in the Himalayas. He claimed that when he attempted to map the genome, he found that the creature possessed 25 pairs of chromosomes, whereas modern humans only have 23. This extra pair of chromosomes appeared to govern the development of the limbic system and the amygdala, suggesting a brain that is far more attuned to the environment than our own. It would explain why these creatures are often described as having a near telepathic ability to evade capture. They are not just hiding in the woods. They are sensing the intent of those who hunt them long before a foot is ever set in their territory. We must also look at the curious case of the Smithsonian Institution and the recurring allegations of the destruction of giant skeletons throughout the early 20th century. From the mound builders of the Ohio Valley to the coastal regions of the South Pacific, there are hundreds of newspaper accounts from the 1800s and early 1900s describing the excavation of human-like giants. Many of these reports state that the bones were shipped to the National Museum for study only to vanish into the basement vaults, never to be seen again. If the genetic blueprint for a 12-foot-tall hominid were to become public knowledge, it would prove that the path of human development was not a straight line, but a chaotic battlefield of competing species. The cover-up is not just about biology. It is about the preservation of the status quo. To admit that a superior, non-industrial hominid exists in our forests is to admit that our way of life is not the only way to thrive on this planet. It would force us to recognize a sovereign intelligence that owes nothing to our laws, our religions, or our technology. While the world stares at screens and follows the scripted lines of mainstream science, the real history of our planet is being kept in the dark, hidden in the very cells of a ghost that refuses to be caught. The DNA is there, the footprints are real, and the silence of the scientific elite is the loudest evidence of all. The final layer of this mystery does not reside in the mud of the forest floor or the silence of a laboratory, but in the terrifying possibility that the suppression of this DNA is a matter of planetary security. As we move into the third decade of the 21st century, the technology to sequence an entire genome has become so accessible that the gatekeepers can no longer rely on simple theft or the classification of files. Instead, they have pivoted to a more sophisticated form of psychological warfare, the weaponization of ridicule. By saturating the public consciousness with hoaxes and low-quality entertainment, they have ensured that any serious scientist who dares to present an anomalous genetic sequence is immediately met with professional exile. Yet, behind the scenes, the collection of data continues with a feverish intensity that suggests a looming deadline. In 2021, a leaked memorandum, allegedly from a private aerospace contractor, described a series of biological recovery missions in the high Sierras. The document did not refer to the subjects as animals or even as Sasquatch. It used the term non-terrestrial biological remnants. This choice of words points toward a theory that many find too disturbing to contemplate. If these creatures are not the product of Earth's natural evolutionary ladder, then their presence here is not an accident of biology, but a deliberate placement. Some researchers suggest that the reason their mitochondrial DNA is human while their nuclear DNA is alien is because they are a living archive, a biological time capsule designed to preserve certain genetic traits that humanity has lost through millennia of domestication and industrialization. The high concentration of sightings near classified military installations and tectonic fault lines has led to the chilling hypothesis that these beings are sensitive to the very energy of the Earth itself. If they possess the ability to perceive the electromagnetic spectrum in ways we cannot comprehend, they might be aware of shifts in the planet's core or impending geophysical changes that our instruments are too crude to detect. To hide the existence of the Sasquatch is to hide the fact that there is a sentience on this planet that understands our world better than we do. The authorities are not protecting a secret about a monster. They are protecting the monopoly on truth. If the public realized that a creature with 3 times our physical strength and a superior sensory suite was living in the mountains, the fragile sense of human dominance over nature would evaporate in an afternoon. There is a recurring story among the indigenous tribes of the North, passed down through generations long before the first Europeans set foot on these shores, of a great peace made between the humans and the people of the woods. The legend says that as long as we stayed in the valleys and they stayed in the high peaks, the world would remain in balance. But we have broken that peace. We have pushed our roads and our radio towers into the heart of their sanctuaries, and in response, the frequency of encounters has shifted from curiosity to confrontation. In the last 10 years, the number of missing person cases in national parks has spiked in areas with high-density Sasquatch reports. These are not just hikers getting lost. These are experienced outdoorsmen vanishing without a trace, leaving behind their gear and their weapons, as if they were plucked from the earth by something that doesn't trigger the fight-or-flight response. The ultimate reason for the DNA cover-up may be found in the looming shadow of the future. If humanity is on the verge of its own genetic revolution through CRISPR technology and synthetic biology, the existence of a perfect, natural prototype would be the most valuable resource on the planet. The DNA of the Sasquatch could hold the key to extreme longevity, rapid cellular regeneration, and a heightened immune system capable of resisting any terrestrial pathogen. The corporations and shadow agencies that have spent 80 years hiding these creatures are not doing it to protect them. They are waiting for the technology to catch up so they can harvest the genetic gold hidden in those massive frames. We are standing at a crossroads. One path leads to the continued denial of our own history, a world where the woods are empty and the mystery is dead. The other path leads into the dark, into the ancient forest where the giant still walks, carrying the secrets of our past and the blueprints for our future. The evidence is mounting, the whistleblowers are growing bolder, and the DNA is screaming to be recognized. We can no longer ignore the heavy footfalls in the brush or the glowing eyes in the night. The silent titan is waiting, and whether we are ready or not, the truth is coming home to roost in the very blood that flows through our veins. The age of the shadow is ending, and the age of the witness has begun.